everyone. Our proposition today is to discuss a new class of technologies to protect people in the era of optimization systems, POTS. Now, depending on what age or what kind of geeky background you have, you may think POTS is this, or potentiometers, or honeypots. But we want to talk about POTS in the good company of pets. POTS are necessary because the types of information systems we have today are undergoing a fundamental shift. This shift is not just about processors and bandwidths becoming faster and storage becoming cheaper, but a shift in the way we engineer and develop systems. In particular, in the 90s, software engineering shifted from shrink-wrap software and PCs to services and clouds, and together with that to agile methods. Now, that may seem self-evident, but let me just take a little survey in this room. Please put your hand up if you know what shrink-wrap software is. That's pretty good. Okay. Put your hand up if you use DVDs. CD-ROMs? Diskettes? Have you ever installed from a diskette? Wow, that's pretty amazing. All right, that's really great. Okay. If you were a developer in the 90s, what were the time intervals between the release of different versions of the software you were working on? Call out numbers.
Years.
Years. What else? Who else? 1 month. 90s.
Does Linux kernel update?
Oh, well, okay, come on. All right, so here's our depiction of the 90s. In the 90s, this prototypical tech-savvy dude would walk down to the local Radio Shack, by now I believe no longer existing, to satisfy his software needs. The software came in a box which contained diskettes. This box had a plastic wrap, the shrink wrap software. Undoing this wrap meant the dude magically transformed into a user. It was a contract. From the perspective of the software engineers in the 90s, once the software was in a box, it was out of the hands of the developers. Once a new version was released, the developers entered a post-release depression colored by complaints for all the bugs and mishaps, which they then set out to fix until the next version, which indeed was often a couple years later. These were dark times. Then came the web, and we came to look like these pastel-colored happy people around a table. The shift to web services and applications enable architectures that incorporate real-time feedback from users. Now, the code remains with the developers, meaning updates can be pushed out frequently, and features could be developed incrementally. And all of this could be measured using the feedback loops. This meant a lot of data. And with that data, machine learning started swallowing software engineering. Services today are made of layers and layers of technologies metricized under the authority of objective functions. Objective functions drive software engineering from head to toe. Selection of software features, service integration, cloud usage, user interaction, user growth, customer service, environmental capture, so on and so forth, are continuously metricized, experimented on, and optimized. In other words, it isn't just those evil advertisers that need the data. Data has become the bread and butter of software engineering. So maybe you're familiar with the term ICTs, information and communication technologies. This is how we've come to describe the systems that are around us. They're focused on storage, processing, and transport of information, and organizing knowledge. So by virtue of knowledge and being able to know things, we associate information systems with risks of surveillance. In fact, privacy-enhancing technologies are a response to the perils of surveillance through information systems. But these new systems are radically different. They leverage the knowledge they gather not only to understand the world, but to optimize it. They seek to extract economic value through the capture and manipulation of people's activities and environments. They treat the world not as a static place to be known or surveilled, but as one to sense and co-create. Optimization sounds, well, optimal, but it turns out social and environmental manipulation at scale causes social risks and harms at scale. A short list of these inadvertent side effects of optimization systems includes social sorting, so sorting out people who are not optimal to whatever your bottom line is, mass manipulation, for example, of news and political systems, asymmetrical concentration of resources in a few companies that have become global monopolies, dominance of majority populations, and erasure of minorities. So in the vocabulary of optimization, because these are somewhat different, these harms arise due to choosing inadequate objective functions. And the great thing is computer scientists are writing about this, especially in the AI safety community, but they say these things are accidents. We actually say they're bad design. Inadequate objective functions in the process of increasing the company's bottom line may improve people's ability to most efficiently conduct asocial behavior, optimize for some part of the user population, which may increase the cost for other users, non-users, and the environments that we live in. Now, we can discuss the whole list, but I'm going to focus on the first three with concrete examples. So I'm going to turn to a location-based service called Waze. Companies like Waze can now have different business models because of the shift to optimization systems. Waze-like services no longer just track and profile individuals to generate spatial intelligence about certain areas, people, and their trajectories, which a lot of advertisement companies did in the past. Location services today leverage their systems to manipulate users' behavior and create ideal geographies that fit the interests of their investors. Population experiments using techniques like A/B testing drive iterative designs that ensure sufficient gain for most Waze users while maximizing profits. So what does Waze do? It basically reroutes its users when there's congestion on a given road, allowing these users to act with perfect selfishness. In some happy universe, this could be a socially optimal outcome. Everybody's trajectory is optimized. But traffic engineers have shown that traffic beating apps might work for an individual, but they often do so at the cost of making congestion worse overall. So to optimize travel time, Waze often redirects users off major highways through suburban neighborhoods that cannot sustain the heavy traffic. While this may be useful for drivers, it affects neighborhoods by making streets busy, noisy, and less safe. In this case depicted here, Waze directs Los Angeles commuters to a 35% grade steep road that has gotten drivers in somewhat precarious situations. So these include cars flying into people's front yards and living rooms, a matter that some may find not so optimal. So consequently, due to Waze, towns may now need to fix and police roads more often. With such systems, even when users benefit, non-users and the environments they inhabit may bear the ill effects of optimization. In fact, Waze may not even benefit all of its users. Coming back to the study by the traffic engineers, when the percentage of drivers with access to traffic information is low, so a few people have Waze, then they are all hunky-dory. They get everywhere faster while leaving the masses behind. But as the number of Waze users increase, the benefit decreases for users and non-users alike. So what could we do for these people, Becca, and environments that are impacted by optimization systems?
Okay, so now that Seda has told you all the problems that we're facing integrating optimization systems into our lives, hopefully she's convinced you, let's talk about what people are doing to fix it. We're calling these methods that people are using to fix these mistakes in optimization HOTS. We found a number of examples of people fighting back against these optimization systems. For example, with the Waze example that Seda mentioned earlier, people are fighting back against the congestion in their towns. In this one case, a resident of a street affected by Waze created an account to report false traffic data like congestion, accidents, and construction every morning during rush hour, and then again every afternoon. It took Waze about 2 weeks to ban his account. More sophisticated attacks have been shown to be possible. There was a group of students, a research group in Israel, who created a bunch of fake Waze accounts and then spoofed their location all to the same highway location. So now Waze thinks that there's a bunch of people stopped on the same highway at the same time, tons of congestion, super bad. So it redirects all of its users off of this highway, and then you can drive down this nice empty highway void of Waze users. So we're calling solutions like these POTS. POTS are protective optimization technologies. Right now, the methods that we've looked at and we've seen kind of happen in the wild are very ad hoc. They're generally temporarily effective, like 2 weeks. Our overall goal here, though, is to be able to design tools to benefit users and non-users of a system who are suffering the ill effects of optimization systems. So by now, you're all on board. You've heard from Seda the harms that optimization systems cause. You've heard what people are doing already to fight back. And the only thing you want to know is, how do I make one? Go.
Thanks. Wait, put the picture of
Maybe
the
you're not
cat back
convinced.
up.
Sure, sure.
Thanks. Okay. Okay, so my actual question is, so is the goal to produce an optimization technology just one that has a better social effect, or is it to subvert optimization technologies? And if so, what are you optimizing for?
Right. So I kind of just want to go on with the slides.
Okay.
We're going to answer that question in the next couple of slides.
But the first answer is no, and the second answer is yes. So how do you design a pot? First, you're going to want to define your benefit function. This function is a result of the optimization system without a pot. This is not the optimization system. This is probably not the benefit function that the optimization system is using. And it takes into account things like users, non-users, environments, and the output of the system. Depending on the pot, there may be more or less of these parameters. And again, it doesn't have to match, or probably doesn't match, the optimization system of the function, because we're not designing better optimization systems. We're going outside of them to fix them. So for example, for Waze, we have certain users that have a high benefit, like this very happy puppy on his fast commute to work. And we have others at the lower end of the benefit function. For example, this is one of the pictures from the article that Seda talked about earlier, with this 35-degree slope in LA, where people's gardens were being run into, people's porches were being destroyed by people going down the street too fast, where they wouldn't have otherwise gone. Okay, and then next we want to identify the inputs of the system, so that you can figure out what you can change. So for example, with Waze, I lost my mouse. There we go. Sorry. So, for example, with Waze, we can make the system think that there's an accident or roadwork on the street, which is artificially changing the inputs that the system has. And then we can build a pot that changes these inputs and evaluates how well it works. And we need people like you, pets people, because pots, like pets, need to be effective, long-lasting, and stealthy. And I think the pets community is quite good at these 3 things. Okay, next. There are multiple strategies for changing the benefit function depending on the overall goal of the pot. So in the top right corner, we can correct the imbalances. So for Waze, maybe we can figure out ways to stop directing people on these super optimal but dangerous routes, so that brings the puppy's commute a little slower, but at the same time, nobody crashes into the front yard of one of the people in this neighborhood. And so that would be this green line in the top right, where we can kind of correct things. If we don't have a scarcity of resources, we maybe even just be able to elevate everyone. On the bottom right, maybe we want to do something more like a protest, where we flip everything around. And the people who weren't getting any benefit before are getting the most benefit, and the people who are benefiting the most get nothing. Or my personal favorite, we can just sabotage the whole system so that the benefit function is messed up for everyone overall, because maybe this is an optimization system that we don't think should exist. Good. So here we have our system model for pots. On the left, you have an optimization system without a pot. As input, it considers its users and some constraints, such as the environment, and from these variables, it decides some output. And on the right, we have a system with a pot. The pot changes the inputs in order to get the desired output. The pot can be induced in training, which you can think of maybe like a data poisoning attack, or it can be something more like an adversarial test example. There could be many more of these. We're open to it. So hopefully now we've taught you what pots are, why you need them, and how to make them. And you'll think about making some pots. Maybe you already are making pots. we have some things that we can discuss if you guys have some questions. We'll see you next year at Hot Pots. And special thanks to our co-author, Errol.
Any questions? So I was wondering what reaction should we expect from the optimization system providers? It seems like some of the pods would be like maybe infringing the service terms of the providers.
Oh yeah, definitely. So I mean, I think that this is actually kind of something that Pets has to deal with as well, which I think is why we wanted to present it to this community as an idea. The hope is that we have some system that we can't change inherently, but we can kind of change from the outside. And the hope, in some cases at least, is that our changes from the outside as we're coming at it force companies and organizations to rethink about how they do optimization systems and what and who benefits and doesn't benefit from their system. Or maybe we're going against their TOS or something, and then it's a different problem. But I think that's a problem that the community is familiar with.
I was reading the other day that the US military are designing these new robots which they can run and they can walk all over all different kinds of terrain. And and they say that for the moment it's just because they want to do reconnaissance, but it's pretty obvious that eventually they want to have walking and running robots that will carry heavy weaponry in a battlefield. And there was an outcry recently because they were also developing a subsystem which was a way for the robots to be able to eat and digest biomass. And so people obviously thought, well, if this robot is built for killing human beings and it can also eat the human beings, there's kind of like a question of like, well, why are we building these kind of things? And we live today in a society like the Western worldview we live in it have a lot of power the way that we can reduce reality. Like as much as we talk about science being about understanding the cosmos and the universe, science is about giving us some form of power over nature and over other human beings. And we reduce reality down to a mechanism that we can fully study and exploit and understand, but it can't answer us for why do we do these things. And obviously you guys are in that area between technology and ethics. Right now there is this general feeling it's the reason why there's such a high level of mental disorder in the society that we've just been reduced to a bureaucratic system of mechanical control where the human beings are just cogs in a machine, and the only way that they can think to go forward is to be a bigger cog and just to expand and to grow and to grow. And now the technology is getting even more powerful to be able to develop new psychological techniques to get people to spend longer and longer time inside of these platforms, to click more and have this huge labor force which is not able to comprehend these gigantic political and financial interests that are manipulating humanity. And it's interesting talking, there is some technique or mechanism that they're using, and how can we throw a wrench or a hammer into that? But how do we go forwards from that? How do we get the technology world, which at one time had a lot of power in the 90s, and in the 60s was really driven by a sense of trying to get access to this computer technology, to use it to improve humanity and to drive humanity forwards, which has now been reduced to withdrawing to hacker spaces to make cat ears or funny little toys. Like, how do we reinvigorate this movement with a sense of vision and destiny once more?
Okay.
Do you want to solve these two?
Should we take that as a comment, or should we? No, I mean, depending on your mood, of course, there is the sabotage option, if you haven't noticed, but
Throw wrenches.
yeah, it's totally an option, right? Yeah. Oh no.
Okay. So I mean, one of the ways of viewing the current political system, political issues that are going on now, is this radically different views of what it takes, what constitutes to optimize society and how those trade-offs should be made. And it's not getting easier to do that, it's getting much harder. So in light of this, how do we move forward?
Yeah. Okay, so I think what's happening is with optimization systems, we go into like a super utilitarian logic. There's some people who are saying, if with autonomous cars, instead of, having 35,000 people die in accidents, only 5,000 die, isn't that better? We actually reject this kind of logic because I think it doesn't, every life matters. And if we just think in these kind of instrumental utilitarian views, then we're doing injustice to certain populations just by virtue of thinking we increase and decrease numbers. So we would disregard this kind of optimization logic as a way to organize society. This doesn't mean that we shouldn't have optimization, but the point that we're trying to make, there are many points we're trying to make with this paper, but one of them is that you cannot have a centralized entity that can think of all the subpopulations and all the sub-effects of optimization systems. So you need to have external channels through which optimization systems can also be challenged. And if you don't have those external channels, you don't have a democratic system which can be challenged or the governance of which can be democratized.
But it may be that we're over-optimized and that this is the reason why things are so difficult now. There may be too much structure in things.
Yeah, so throw wrenches.
Yeah.
All power to the people.
Right. So I'm trying to understand the difference between pots and pets, and if you're trying to sort of encourage a paradigm shift. And I'm not sure. It seems like, so I'd just like to point out historically, after Snowden, there was a huge shift in interest in privacy. And the goal was to sort of prevent nation-state actors in general from doing large-scale mass surveillance, because it will probably lead to something such as, a second Holocaust or lots of death by nation-state actors. Now, in the machine learning and fairness paradigm, seems to be more focused on, given that we're using optimization techniques in large parts of society, social services, et cetera, we want to defend people's civil rights, their equality, equity, right to a good life, from being unfairly and discriminatorily targeted by sort of machine learning algorithms, by optimization techniques. These are actually, I think, two fairly different paradigms which haven't been properly connected. It seems like PETS was originally aimed at the first, is now aware of the second, and I'm not sure exactly, is POTS trying to aim at sort of essentially preventing unfair optimization, but then to some extent, is that actually a larger problem or more important problem, or is it just like a neglected secondary problem to the things which PETS were built to do to begin with?
I want to say that it's not a subset of pets. I think that we're at pets because there's a lot of overlap in what the pets community does and what we think POTS should be. We also think that we need a lot of pets technologies built into things like POTS. And maybe Seda has more to say on this, but...
Yeah, so I think we tried to show the shift from information systems to optimization systems. And information systems, you still care about knowing things. And you can imagine that privacy is still important. If you don't want something to be known, you don't want it to be in the system, right? But the optimization systems also completely transform surveillance in the sense that if knowing things in the past was a way to surveil people, optimization systems are about predicting things in the future so that they can stop you or manipulate you into doing something different. To give you an example, if there was going to be a way to predict demonstrations happening, it doesn't matter that the system knows who you are. It's the fact that you're seen within the pattern of a demonstration potentially happening, and it's the ability to manipulate you not to go to that demonstration that is now at stake, right? And so that's a very different form of surveillance that is transformed through optimization. So I think classical pets still have value, confidentiality has value, being able to keep events that can be inferred and predicted confidential has great value, but optimization systems transform surveillance so much that we might also have to transform the kind of things pets can do.
So, sorry, I was curious to know if for the case of Waze, because of the bad press, did the company...
We can't hear you.
Speak up a little.
Yeah, sorry. For the case of Waze, because of the bad press, do you think there is a hope that the Waze will also include some social cost in the optimization, or do you think it's not a solution?
I don't think that they will. I'm speculating. But a lot of the communities that have been struggling with with kind of the bad end of the optimization for Waze have tried to work with Waze and haven't gotten very far. And so, no, I'm not optimistic about Waze making their system worse for their users in favor of some non-users that aren't considered in their model. But maybe I'm a pessimist.
So you think maybe regulation by a city or country could be a way, like to force company to include some social implication? Or
So would regulation help? Will we regulate against it?
Yeah, I'm just asking if some country or city maybe have tried to say, okay, we're gonna ban Waze, except if Waze is gonna
cities haven't been successful. The one kind of regulation way that this has been dealt with within cities is that we found some cities putting up signs that say local traffic only. There was one city in New Jersey that gave the people who lived on this street little yellow cards to put in their windows, and then if you didn't have a yellow card, you would get pulled over and fined for because says no through traffic. But this isn't punishing Waze in any way, right? It's punishing its users, and maybe they lose a few users to this, or maybe these people just learn not to go down this street and they keep using Waze. I'm not sure, but this is the only kind of regulation or laws that we've seen in this way.
So, okay. So, I guess a question concerns something from both your presentation and some of the questions. I worry that you've kind of over-optimized on optimization or something like that. You kind of seem to, how to say this coherently and succinctly. It seems like you have this choice of just saying, okay, let's just look for these ways to, interrupt optimizations wherever we think, hey, maybe there's a problem, and then you run the danger of, just, man, let's tear it all down, and then we'll just sit here and groove on the rubble, to paraphrase a David Fry album for the other very old people in the room, like Jeremy. Wake up. Or you have this sort of problem that what you end up having to do is effectively meta-optimize, because you have to decide when it's a POTS that is worth pursuing and when it isn't. So I worry that you found some nice, very good, salient examples of, clearly you optimize on a particular thing, and then, that left out a lot. But, without some level of optimization, you don't have things like this building or the mechanisms by which we all got here physically in this room.
Either was good, it's fine. Right, so welcome to our backup slides. We actually spent a lot of time trying to think about this idea of if we're just re-optimizing optimization systems, the same problems still exist, right? Like we might be able to, if we go back to the benefit curves, right, there are still going to be people who are losing out in all of our schemes, probably. Maybe if there's no scarcity of resources in some weird perfect problem, we can get this blue line in the top right corner. But in general, we don't think that's super realistic. And so there are, I think, any ethical problems that are existing within the optimization systems themselves are probably still existing in POTS. And I think that's something that we need to think about a lot.
Can I say one more thing? So it turns out like the history of optimization systems always comes with counter optimization systems, right? There's never an optimization system that exists happily. The good example is search engine and search engine optimization. And so the point is, and this is a really hard political point, which also we've encountered with pets, is that if we want other people to also be able to optimize and not just people who have money and who can pay for counter optimization, then is there a sort of a reason for people like us to be working on ways of making pots available to a greater audience than, for example, people who have money?
So POTS is, I mean, it is still doing optimization. You're just optimizing for something different. And I think...
Sometimes.
Is there, well, I don't know about sometimes, right? Whatever you're trying to do, you're trying to do something, and that is the thing you're optimizing for, right? Taking a very broad view of what optimization is, right? It's basically you're trying to get to a goal, and maybe you can't get the goal, but you want to get as close as possible, so you have some metric in your head for how close am I to my goal, right? And so I'm wondering, how can we take a lesson from pets where, for example, initially some very nice work was done on using entropy, for example, to measure the quality of a privacy-enhancing technology or the amount of anonymity in a system. And then over time we realized, well, it's not the entropy, which is like a global average, that really matters. It's something akin to min entropy, or how good does it do for the worst person, right? Not the worst person, but how good does it do for the person who benefits the least, right? And maybe that is one thing a pot might want to optimize for example. So can we take a lesson of global... So most pots today are most optimization technologies today are optimized exactly for the opposite. They take a small set of people and they want to say, optimize for these people, whatever it happens to everyone else doesn't matter. And maybe we want to look at what pets has learned and say, optimize the global minimum, raise the global minimum, and see what happens.
First of all, we really like the way you've already internalized the term POTS. So, do you want to say something about the benefit function?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So, so one thing that we kind of made sure to talk about, one more? Okay, sure. So one thing we wanted, that we, the first thing we said when you make a pot is figure out who's losing out, right? And then try to fix the bottom of the benefit function. Kind of maybe at the expense of the top, hopefully not at the expense of someone in the middle. So I think that kind of in the spirit of this idea of kind of your minimum entropy, your person at the minimum of the thing, that's what POTS are essentially from the very beginning aiming to do.
So that's just one choice, right? You can make other choices.
Yeah.
Like that one, like the sabotage.
Well, the sabotage choice, but this is more of a mess the system up thing, kind of, right?
Which is
it's a
goal
wrench.
in itself, right?
You're
messing it up because you want to achieve a larger goal.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It seems to me like POTS could also be, or are already being used for equal purposes as well.
For what?
Can you
Your
speak
mic
louder,
isn't
please?
working, so just speak loud.
Right, it seems like POTS could be used and are already being used for equal purposes as well. And I think fake news factories are a good example of a equal pot, maybe. Is there some notion of a counter pot or a second order pot that you could pick up to counteract?
We don't hear.
So we'll repeat it.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, what did Tarek say?
I don't know what I think repeat the question.
Okay. All right, so he's saying, aren't pots used for bad too? And aren't they already being used for bad?
And can you have second order pots that correct the bad pots?
Can we have pots on top of pots? Within pots?
Why not?
With pets?
Yeah.
And I think we can talk about this in the context of pets as well, right? Which is like there are kind of misuses of pets in the same way that there are misuses of pots.
Yeah, and also we've kind of noticed that within the research community, adversarial machine learning often assumes that the users are the adversaries, and we wanted to have a model where we wanted to see the ones who are running these large-scale optimization systems to be the adversaries and the users trying to protect themselves. So that was part of what we're trying to do.
So very nice work. I'm glad you have that slide up right now because I'm trying to figure out sort of the broadness of this framework.
Sure.
So, which pets are pots, which pets are not pots? Like, is the Tor network a pot?
I don't think the Tor network
what about the browser, the Tor browser that changes, the way that your browser fingerprint looks to then disturb perhaps.
Okay, that's a pot.
Yeah.
Things that I think are pots. Ad blockers, we think are pots. Tor, I don't think in and of itself is a pot. I think something that counters fingerprinting techniques is a pot. Other pets that are pots.
So, like Tor pluggable transports?
Where's the optimization?
Well, it's overcoming censorship circumvention, right?
Sure. What pets are pots, what pets aren't pots, etc. And pluggable transports. Are pluggable transport pots? I don't see the optimization that you're fighting against there. I see kind of a system that you're fighting against, but not necessarily some sort of optimization in what you're losing out. At least not a technical one.
Okay, I'm sorry. I think we are way over time, so we'll have to take all the questions offline.